I request everyone to be kindly seated. Hello. I request everyone to kindly keep your phones on silent mode for the smooth conduct of the program. I request the audience to kindly rise as the chief guest and the dignitaries arrive. Good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor and privilege to welcome you all to the 32nd Lal Bahadur Shastri Memorial Lecture. This annual lecture serves as a tribute to the enduring legacy of Bharat Ratna, late Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri, a leader whose values of integrity, sincerity, and dedication to the nation continues to inspire us. I extend a special and heartfelt welcome to our esteemed chief guest, Dr. Justice Dhananjaya Y. Chandrachud, former Chief Justice of India. Sir, it is indeed an honor to have your graceful presence with us today. This event has been organized by Lal Bahadur Shastri National Memorial Trust in collaboration with the National Museum, Government of India, and Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management, Delhi. Established in 1995, our institute has been committed to upholding the values and principles espoused by late Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri. Today, we stand as one of the premier management institutions in the country, offering 4 AICTE-approved postgraduate management program and a fellow program in management. I now request our dignitaries to kindly take their seats on the dais. I request the dignitaries to kindly take your seats on the dais. I now invite Shri Sunil Shastri, Trustee Lal Bahadur Shastri National Memorial Trust, to kindly join us on the dais. At this moment, I would like to invite our esteemed chief guest, Dr. Justice Dhananjaya Y. Chandrachud, former Chief Justice of India, Shri Anil Shastri, holding trustee, Lal Bahadur Shastri National Memorial Trust, Shri Sunil Shastri, trustee, Lal Bahadur Shastri National Memorial Trust, Professor Praveen Gupta, director, Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management, and Colonel Ajay Sood, registrar, Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management, to kindly proceed for the ceremonial lighting of the lamp and pay floral tributes to late Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri. I now invite Shri Sunil Shastri, Trustee Lal Bahadur Shastri National Memorial Trust, to extend a formal welcome to our chief guest by offering a bouquet. I now invite Dr. Sheetal, Head Lal Bahadur Shastri Memorial, to present a planter to our chief guest. While a luminary of Justice Chandrachud's stature needs no introduction, yet I have a privilege to invite Mr. Mudit Shastri, Trustee Lal Bahadur Shastri National Memorial Trust, to kindly give a brief introduction of our chief guest.
A very warm good evening to Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, Mr. Anil Shastri, Mr. Sunil Shastri, and all the esteemed guests present here. At the onset, I would like to thank Lal Bahadur Shastri Memorial Trust for giving me this opportunity of introducing the former Chief Justice of India, Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. Thanks to this forum, I have had the privilege of introducing some of the leading personalities and icons of India in recent years. But today I feel slightly anxious, as every time I start talking here, one tends to imagine the power a judge's pen holds, and based on that immense power, the level of responsibility that comes with it. And under this responsibility, Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud has passed some of the landmark judgments that have altered the way we perceive the Indian judicial system, and feel that even whatever happens, in the end, Indian courts and Indian judicial system is there to protect us and the great Indian Constitution. With this, I would like to give a brief introduction of Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. Dr. Justice Dhananjaya Y. Chandrachud served as the 50th Chief Justice of India from November 22 until 2024. This is, in fact, the second longest Chief Justice period for any Chief Justice of India. Before that, his father had served for nearly 7 years. In a judicial career spanning nearly 25 years, he was a judge of the Bombay High Court, Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court, and a judge of the Supreme Court before assuming the highest judicial office. Educated at St. Stephen's College and at the Campus Law Center in Delhi University, he studied at Harvard Law School, where he earned the LLM and SJD degrees. He practiced law at Bombay High Court and was designated as senior advocate in 1998. He went on to serve as the Additional Solicitor General of India. The most influential jurist of his generation, his jurisprudence consistently constitutional rights by weaving dignity, liberty, and equality into a constitutional framework, responsive to contemporary challenges. He championed gender justice, the rights of disabilities, free speech, liberty, and equality, while also laying down a robust jurisprudence on healthcare rights, pioneering the law on living wills, advance directives, and abortion rights. His landmark pronouncements include the recognition of privacy as a fundamental right, the decriminalization of homosexuality and adultery, and the affirmation of equality in matters of caste, religion, and prison reform. In a sense, have asserted the liberty of under trials, the sanctity of electoral freedoms, and the digital freedoms of the citizenry against technological infringements. He was a sole dissenter in the Aadhaar case. As Chief Justice, he spearheaded the digital transformation of the judiciary through projects like live streaming of court hearings, AI-assisted transitions of judgments into all languages recognized by the Constitution, a unified repository of judicial data for all courts through the National Judicial Data Grid and the ESCR initiative, which gives free speech to judgments of the Supreme Court since independence. It gives free access to judgments of the Supreme Court since independence. His reforms as chairperson of the E-Committee of the Supreme Court laid the foundation for citizen-centric access to justice. Justice Chandrachud has delivered addresses at premier universities worldwide, including Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Cambridge, and LSE, and at global forums including the United Nations, the Asian Development Bank, and the World Bank. His work has contributed to shaping debates on the intersection of laws, rights, and governance at global level. His first book, titled Why the Constitution Matters, has been published recently by Penguin Random House. Besides continuing to speak before diverse audiences, after retirement from judicial office, he has been designated as distinguished professor of law by the National Law University, Delhi. On the professional front, he works as an independent consultant and international arbitrator under the International Chamber of Commerce, London Court of International Arbitration, Singapore International Arbitration Center, apart from serving as an arbitrator in the domestic arbitrations, and is associated with the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague. With this, I would like to welcome Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud for giving this prestigious Lal Bahadur Shastri Memorial Lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Muditji. Now I would like to invite Shri Anil Shastri, holding trustee, Lal Bahadur Shastri National Memorial Trust, to give the welcome address.
The chief guest of our function today, Dr. Justice Dhananjaya, Chandrachud, Mr. Sunil Shastri, trustees of Lal Bahadur Shastri National Memorial Trust. At the outset, let me extend a very hearty welcome to Dr. Chandrachud, who is here today to deliver his memorial lecture, which is in the memory of India's second Prime Minister, Lal Bahadur Shastri. His topic, Ethics of Public Life in an Age of Technology. And so we are looking forward to listening to you. I also take pleasure in welcoming all of you who are present here for the 32nd Lal Bahadur Shastri Memorial Lecture. I wish to recall when the first time I met Justice Chandrachud. I don't know if he remembers. You were the Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court, and we were traveling together on a flight from Delhi to Allahabad. And I happened to be seated next to his seat, and in the first row. And initially I thought him to be a managing director or CEO of a corporate organization because he was immaculately dressed in a suit and with a tie and all that. So I thought that, it has to be some CEO. But when we introduced ourselves, then I got to know that he was the Chief Justice of Allahabad High Court. Of course, I had a few questions with regard to the vacancies and also about the thousands and thousands of pending cases in various courts in India. And I'm happy that, Dr. Chandrachud, you answered all those questions diligently and to my satisfaction. And after that, of course, I met him a few weeks ago when I visited his home to invite him for the lecture along with Shastri. He offered me tea which had a different flavor, and I told him that it was really just too good. And he revealed that it was vegan tea and that he consumed only vegan food. That could perhaps be the reason that Justice Chandrachud doesn't look his age. And let me tell you that the director of our institute, Dr. Praveen Gupta, who is sitting here, he has managed to arrange some vegan food for you when you go for the refreshments. And some snacks he has got from a purely vegan restaurant. So you are pretty safe here. And the topic chosen by our chief guest, ethics of public life in an age of technology, is apt and relevant at a fast-changing time. Value systems have been given a go-by in almost every sphere of life and activity, whether it is corporate, politics, medicine, academics, or even judiciary. The fast-changing pace of technology has further worsened the situation. Today's lecture is not only timely, but deeply significant. No question that lies in the heart of governance and democracy. How will we preserve ethical integrity in a world increasingly shaped by technology? As we reflect on ethics in public life, we must also confront a pressing reality, the challenge of justice delivery systems across nations. In India, the judiciary continues to face an enormous burden where over 80,000 cases are pending in the Supreme Court, 60 lakh cases in the High Courts, and close to 5 crore, 4.88 to be precise, crore in the courts. They represent lives waiting for justice, rights awaiting recognition, being tested in institutions. The situation in some other countries is even worse. For example, Brazil's court system has 140 crore pending lawsuits. And that becomes a matter of concern, not only for the litigants, but also by the public at large. We are truly privileged to have you here, sir, whose tenure as the Chief Justice of India was marked by progressive judicial reforms, emphasis on digital transformation of courts, and a deep commitment to constitutional morality. I must also tell you that Dr. Chandrachud is an ardent advocate of transformative constitutionalism. His insights will undoubtedly help us understand how ethics can guide technology in strengthening democratic institutions. I wish you all an enriching and thought-provoking evening. Thank you so much.
Now, with great honor, I invite our distinguished chief guest, Justice Chandrachud, to deliver the 32nd Lal Bahadur Shastri Memorial Lecture on the topic Ethics of Public Life in an Age of Technology. Please, sir.
Honorable dignitaries, Shri Sunil Shastri, Shri Anil Shastri, members of the Shastri family, members of the faculty of the Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management, students, esteemed members of the audience, and fellow travelers in thought. We come together in a moment that invites reflection, where experience meets inquiry, and where the ordinary reveals meanings that often pass unnoticed. It is within such moments that understanding deepens and the familiar acquires a different significance. The theme before us, Ethics of Public Life in an Age of Technology, does not begin with technology alone. It begins with the standards by which we choose to live. For it is in those standards that we guide the systems that we now create as a society. There are men and women whom history remembers. And then there are individuals to whom history belongs. Today we have gathered here to light a lamp for a distinguished citizen who once carried 400 million hungry hearts on his thin, if even trembling shoulders, and never once let them fall. On the 2nd of October 1904, in a small rain-soaked home in Mughalsarai, a child was born to a widowed mother who had nothing to give him. No wealth, no name, no inheritance, But let me tell you something about that boy's childhood that the textbooks do not. When young Lal Bahadur was perhaps 9 or 10 years old, he had to cross the Ganga every day to reach his school on the other side. He had no money for the boatman, so he swam across the Ganga every single day. No law said that he had to go to school. No law said the river would not kill him. No law promised him a reward for the effort. He swam because of something the river cannot drown, the government cannot legislate, and no court can enforce. He swam because of character. I ask you tonight and this evening, what is character if not the art of being human? Now hold that image, a boy in the current, books on his head, nothing between him and drowning except his own will. It is often in moments of disruption, when the ordinary course of life is suddenly unsettled, that these standards come into sharpest focus. It was in 1956. The night gave no forewarning. It settled over Ariyalur, a town in Tamil Nadu, with the familiar cadence of travel, families in conversation, children resting against window panes, and an unspoken assurance that the journey would reach its intended end. Then, within an instant that fractured that assurance, the train lurched, twisted, and descended into ruin. Metal yielded, compartments splintered, and motion turned into devastation. Lives were lost without spectacle in the abrupt and unforgiving collapse of what had long been trusted as safe. News of the rail accident moved with urgency, carrying more than figures. It carried a human weight that no statistic can contain. The enduring cost of failure, measured in lives disrupted and futures erased. When that account reached Lal Bahadur Shastri, who was then entrusted with a charge of the important Ministry of the Railways as Union Minister, the issue before him did not assume a legal frame. He said, "I feel that a minister is responsible for every action of his ministry." No statute required his resignation. No constitutional principle insisted upon such an act of accountability. The apparatus of governance possessed the capacity to absorb the shock and proceed. Yet he chose another course. He relinquished office. The impulse behind that decision drew strength from an inner discipline, an understanding that responsibility, if it is to retain meaning, must travel beyond formal obligations, including in public governance. In his public life, as reflected in his addresses, this conviction appears with clarity. Governance derives its legitimacy as much from moral trust as from institutional authority. That moment, often recalled in isolation, gathers deeper coherence when placed within the discipline that shaped his life. One incident endures. After relinquishing the office of Railway Minister, he returned home as a man answerable to his own standards, re-entering a life governed by personal accountability. It is recorded that he sat in his drawing room with the lights turned off, mindful that household expenses would now rest on his own means, choosing, even in that modest act, to align conduct with circumstance. What appears simple at first glance reveals a far more exacting ethic beneath it, a refusal to allow public office to insulate personal life from principle. This formed part of a consistent pattern. As Sandeep Shastri records in his assessment of his life, there was not even a whiff of a scandal involving his actions. That same discipline carried inward into domains where public scrutiny seldom enters. On one occasion, and pardon my referring to this, his young son took an official car without permission and secured a driving license below the legally permissible age. When this came to his notice, the response followed with immediacy and exactness. The license stood cancelled, and those who facilitated it were called to account. Within his own household, a clear boundary asserted itself. Proximity to power would never become a means to evade the law. No indulgence found entry. No easing of standards was allowed. The principle that guided his resignation from public office held equal authority in private life. The force of this episode lies in its consistency, a refusal to permit even the slightest deviation to erode the discipline by which he chose to live. This episode brings to my mind a moment from the life of Chanakya, whose sense of duty carried an exacting clarity. Once a Chinese visitor had come to speak with him on a matter of state. Chanakya was at work, seated beside a lamp sustained through public resources. As the conversation moved away from affairs of governance and entered a personal exchange, he paused, extinguished the lamp, and lit another drawn from his own means. When the visitor expressed curiosity, his response carried a disarming simplicity. What belongs to the state must remain in the service of the state. Anything personal must rest on one's own resources. There was no audience there, no expectation of acknowledgement, no gesture crafted for effect. It reflected an inner discipline, a way of ordering one's conduct so that public trust remains intact in every circumstance, even in choices which go unnoticed. Lal Bahadur Shastri ji entered into the office of Prime Minister of India in 1964. Barely a year later, in 1965, the country met its first great test after his assumption of office. Enemy tanks were rolling towards our borders. Our granaries stood empty. America was threatening to cut off our wheat. A nation of 400 million stood on the edge of hunger and humiliation. As Prime Minister, he walked up to a microphone and did something no Prime Minister before him had ever done. He did not ask the soldiers to fight harder. He did not ask the farmers to grow more. He asked his own family to skip dinner first. He fasted in his own home before he asked a single Indian to fast. When the country saw that, a Prime Minister sleeping hungry, so that his people could not feel alone in their hunger, something broke open in the soul of India. Millions of families began skipping one meal every Monday. The Shastri Vrat was born. A nation fasted and a nation fed herself. That was not just an act of leadership, but an ultimate act of communion and love. Then came those 4 words that still make the Indian eyes moisten. Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. In one breath, he lifted the rifle of the shoulder and the plow of the farmer to the same sacred altar. In one breath, he told a wounded nation, "You are not poor, you are not weak, you are not small. You are the land of warriors and the land of wheat, and no power on earth can bend you." And mind you, this was just 3 years after the Chinese debacle in 1962. Ayub Khan, who sat across Shastriji at Tashkent, expecting to meet an opponent, is said to have walked away, murmuring that he had met instead a saint. When the news of his passing reached the streets of Delhi on that cold January morning in 1966, grown men and women, strangers to one another, stood in the lanes and wept because they felt that something pure, something rare, something irreplaceable had slipped out of India forever. Shastriji owned no house. He left behind no bank balance. When his family went to collect his belongings, they found but a borrowed car he was still paying for in installments, a few khadi kurtas, and a small bundle of books. That was the estate of a Prime Minister of India. That was the wealth of the man who defeated a heavily armed American-backed neighbor and fed a starving nation. It is within this lineage of thought that we begin to see the life of Shastri Ji with greater clarity. What draws us to him lies beyond moments of crisis. It rests in the texture of his everyday choices. He held himself and those within his own home to a standard that admitted of no compromise. He marked clear boundaries where public resources were concerned, and he approached governance through consultation rather than assertion. D.R. Mankekar wrote that Shastriji carried, and I quote, a child's heart moved by human suffering with a granite will when action called. Even in leadership, he leaned towards consensus rather than command, humility rather than display, responsibility rather than rhetoric. His first address to the nation as Prime Minister carried that same spirit, an appeal that drew its strength from the people, a reminder that leadership derives its authority through them and remains anchored in their trust, in the trust of the people. Integrity reveals itself through the discipline of the smallest choices in public life. Once I see it in that light, it no longer feels distant or confined to one's life or one life. It carries forward, finding expression in lives shaped under very different circumstances, guided by a similar clarity of purpose. Now, let us place the life of Lal Bahadur Shastri Ji in the context of the Indian social and cultural traditions. In 1858, in a small town in Maharashtra, Dhondokeshav Karve entered a society shaped by deeply entrenched customs, where the lives of widowed women unfolded under exclusion and silent suffering. I often find myself reflecting on the turn his own life took. The loss of his first wife placed him within that very reality, one that continued to receive him even as it turned away from countless others. That contrast did not leave him untouched. What followed was no sudden transformation. It took the form of a gradual awakening, an understanding that what society accepts as custom does not always withstand the test of justice. That awareness did not remain confined to thought, it found its way into action. At a time when widow remarriage invited social hostility and personal isolation, he chose to marry a woman who had lost her spouse, Anandibai, in 1893. The consequences followed inevitably: social boycott, exclusion, and a gradual withdrawal of acceptance that compels conformity far more effectively than open opposition. But yet Karve held his ground. What began as a deeply personal decision grew into a lifelong commitment to restore dignity where it had long been denied, and to reimagine the moral limits that society sets for itself. The course of his life did not rest with that single act. It carried forward into institutions, into the education of women, into the creation of spaces where dignity could take root and endure. Over time, that same moral clarity appeared in a different, equally demanding form in the life of his son, Raghunath Dhondo Karve, born in 1882. If the father challenged social exclusion, the son chose to confront a different barrier, a barrier shaped by silence. He spoke openly on questions of sexuality and reproductive rights at a time when such subjects remained deliberately unaddressed and swept under the carpet. Resistance followed him as well, drawn from a deep discomfort, grounded in the same impulse to bring into the open what society hesitated to acknowledge. A century earlier, in 1772, Raja Ram Mohan Roy was born into a world deeply anchored in tradition. He moved between traditions, studied with intent, and engaged with ideas to examine rather than simply gather them. What he encountered did not sit easily within him. It pressed against the expectations placed before him, and in that tension, a mind took shape, one that refused comfort in unquestioned custom. It began within his own family. His elder brother had passed away, and the household gathered in the shadow of a grief that had barely found words. I want you to pause with me for a moment here. In that space stood his sister-in-law, now a widow, her life altered in an instant by a loss she had no hand in shaping. What followed unfolded under the weight of expectation, treated almost as inevitability. She was taken to the funeral pyre and forced into the flames under the sanction of a ritual. Raja Ram Mohan Roy stood there and witnessed it, saw a life still full of breath consumed in the name of duty. Some moments recede with time, others take hold and remain. This was one that endured. It did not remain a passing memory. It stayed with him, unsettled, demanding an answer he could not ignore. What had long been spoken of as virtue began to reveal a harsher truth, a form of suffering sustained through silence, repetition, and the weight of unquestioned custom. He did not turn away from that discomfort. He carried it with him. In the years that followed, he wrote, he spoke, he engaged, grounded in what he had witnessed with his own eyes. His words were not crafted for effect. They arose from conviction. At the heart of his effort lay a question that continues to confront us. Can a practice claim legitimacy when it stands in opposition to the dignity of human life? That is the question which the Supreme Court will answer, whether it is consistent with the dignity of human life to exclude women from the right to pray on the ground that they belong to the menstrual age group of 10 to 50. Let us await the decision. What followed took shape through persistence and clarity. Through the 1810s and 1820s, Raja Ram Mohan Roy entered into sustained engagement, turning to scriptures to challenge prevailing interpretations, writing tracts, and placing reasoned petitions before the colonial administration. He worked to show that sati carried no binding sanction in foundational texts, that its continuance rested more on custom than on necessity. His efforts gathered attention over time, drawing support as well as resistance. By 1829, sustained labor contributed to a decisive step. Under Lord William Bentinck, the practice of sati was abolished through Regulation 17 of the Bengal Code, declared illegal and punishable. What had long been endured as inevitability met the authority of law. When I reflect on this journey, what stays with me is its character. He did not rely on a single act of defiance. He chose the harder path of sustained engagement, questioning what had been assumed, writing with care, inviting scrutiny. In his letters and interventions, a consistent thread emerged. Truth must withstand examination. Belief cannot rest on ritual alone. Society must gather the courage to look at itself without illusion. Reform in his hands arose from what he had come to see and could no longer set aside. The next part of my presentation, I deal with what I call Indian civilizational idea. Morality never arrives as a doctrine waiting to be declared. It travels into conduct, into choices made when no one is present to observe us, into responses shaped when silence would have been easier. It does not begin as argument. It begins as lived conviction. It was in 1893 in Chicago, at the Parliament of the World's Religions. The hall stood filled with representatives from many traditions, each carrying their histories, their convictions. Into that space walked Swami Vivekananda, young, unfamiliar to most present, and carrying a clarity that does not seek to compete but to connect. He began with a line that has traveled through times, and I want to say it exactly as he said it. This is a direct quotation. Sisters and brothers of America. In that instant, the room responded with a warmth that broke the formality of the gathering. What followed did not take the form of a defense of one path over another. It opened into something far more expansive when he said, "We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true." Even at that point, Swamiji's thought didn't rest with criticism. It moves towards possibility, toward a way of living where difference can exist without weakening unity, and unity does not demand sameness. There is strength in his words, though it does not arise from opposition. It comes from balance, from remaining rooted without closing oneself, from holding conviction without hardening into rigidity. Standing before that gathering, he offered something more than a message. He revealed a way of engaging with the world and with humanity at large. And it brings me back to the thread that has been unfolding through these lives. Life does not take shape through assertion alone. It is formed through how one holds difference, how one carries conviction, and how one creates spaces for others while remaining anchored within oneself. In the early decades of the 20th century, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore wrote what would later find its place in creative unity. These are words that do not rush towards a conclusion. They unfold with care as reflections gathered over time, shaped through a sustained effort to understand what holds life together beneath its visible fragments. He does not turn first to systems or structures. He begins with an experience, something within us that refuses to be reduced to function alone. In those pages, I find Gurudev turning inward, drawing attention to something many of us have felt, even if we have never named it. He speaks of a presence within us that does more than observe. It seeks to bring things together, to discover coherence where life often appears scattered. I want to share his words here exactly as he wrote them. As Gurudev Tagore puts it, it is something within us that gives expression to an ideal of unity in its endless show of variety. When I read this, it does not come to me as an abstract idea. It feels closer to recognition. It reminds us of how we respond to music, to beauty, to those rare moments when scattered experiences seem to gather into something whole, something that holds meaning beyond immediate understanding. As I sit with his words a little longer, a different way of approaching life begins to unfold before us. Life does not appear as something to be arranged from the outside. It takes shape through the manner in which we attend to life, through how we relate, how we respond, how we draw together what would otherwise remain separate. What we find compelling here is the absence of insistence. There is no demand that life follow a prescribed path. Instead, there is an invitation, gentle yet deeply compelling, to recognize that what we create in thought, in action, in relationship, carries within it the possibility of harmony. Now let me bring about a sudden break in the tune or the theme of my lecture and take a little break and dwell on today's world. As these reflections gather in my mind of lives shaped with care, of choices guided by attention, I find myself drawn to the present. What does that same discipline of attention ask of us today when the conditions around us stand so profoundly altered? Change usually never arises. Change never usually arrives in a single or dramatic instant. We see change unfold through the way information now travels, at a pace and scale that leaves little room for reflection. Change appears in fragments. I recall, for instance, the recent elections in Nepal. Images and voices began to circulate, familiar, persuasive, but often fabricated. Speeches surfaced that were never delivered. Faces appeared to speak words they had never uttered. What concerns me is how easily the line begins to blur. For many, the distinction between what has occurred and what has been constructed grows harder to sustain. Presence once carried its own authority. Today, production can imitate it with unsettling ease. What follows from this is the way doubt begins to displace certainty. in the way verification struggles to keep pace with circulation, and in the ease with which impressions settle before they are examined. Attention moves away from asking whether something is true and turns instead towards reacting as though it already stands confirmed. You see something on Instagram, your attention turns away from asking whether it is true towards reacting to what you have seen as if it is the truth and the whole truth. So in that movement, the ground of trust begins, almost imperceptibly, to give way. In the United States, as political campaigns gather momentum, I see the landscape of communication take on forms that escape immediate notice. Videos begin to circulate, polished and persuasive, carrying the tone and cadence of public figures crafted through artificial means. They travel with remarkable speed, often outpacing any effort at verification. By the time questions arise, impressions have already settled. What remains is more than misinformation. It creates a deeper disorientation, a gradual erosion of the line between what is seen and what can be trusted. These moments, they never stand alone. We inhabit a world today more connected than ever, where information travels without restraint, and within that very connectivity, a certain fragility reveals itself. The challenge before us no longer lies only in receiving information. It lies in how we attend to information, in our willingness to pause, even briefly, and ask, what is real? What is constructed? And what are we prepared to accept without question? Earlier this year, in the US, 2 states, Alabama and West Virginia, concluded investigations into the online gaming platform Roblox. Children logged into what appeared to be a space for play and found themselves in environments that extend far beyond that purpose. Investigators pointed to instances where minors encountered grooming, exposure to sexual content, and interactions that moved from the game into private channels. The matter led to a settlement exceeding USD 23 million, accompanied by requirements for stronger safeguards, age verification, tighter control over communication, and closer monitoring of interactions. Investigators entered these digital spaces as participants rather than distant observers. They created accounts, some designed to resemble very young users, and allowed them to move through the platform as any child would. What unfolded in certain instances carried a troubling edge. Interactions turned suggestive. Conversations entered inappropriate territory, and the safeguards meant to separate age groups proved unreliable in practice. What stands out here is the ease with which such moments arise, often without drawing immediate notice. In Australia, regulators have stepped forward and demanded clear answers from gaming companies. They asked how such environments were monitored, how children were protected, and whether existing systems could truly prevent exploitation. The concern rests on a recognition that platforms used daily by millions of young people can also become points of entry for harm when our collective vigilance weakens as society. These events reveal a transformation in the very character of the spaces which we inhabit. What once felt contained now extends without clear edges. What appears as play carries layers that remain hidden at first glance. And for those who move through these spaces, especially the young, the experience carries complexities far beyond what it seems from the outside. Times are changing. With the advent of technology, our age has given us 4 new rivers, 4 currents Shastriji could not have imagined, but which will decide the future of India. And isn't it natural? After all, the gilli danda has been replaced by the smartphone. The first river is artificial intelligence. In May of 2023, a man by the name of Geoffrey Hinton often called the godfather of AI, walked out of Google. He had spent 50 years building the very technology that won him the Turing Award. He left, he said, so that he could finally warn the world about what he had helped to create. When a journalist asked him why he had built it in the first place, the journalist asked him, well, why did you leave and why are you now in doubt and then why did you create this in the first place? He said, and he answered with a sentence which one cannot forget. He said, I console myself with a normal excuse. If I hadn't done it, someone else would have. That is the alibi of every engineer, of every weapon in every age. And it has now become the alibi of an entire industry. Albert Einstein, who once stood inside this same shadow, warned us long ago. And he said, it has become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity. That's where the danger lies today, where the technology which we have created is threatening and has in fact exceeded our own humanity. Today, an algorithm decides who gets the loan, who gets the interview, who gets the bail, who is seen and who is buried in the feed. And when the algorithm errs, no one is held to account. The coder blames the model blames the data, and the data blames the history. This is legal innocence in its newest, most powerful form. And here our forefathers asked us a question. If you build a machine, if you cannot answer for, are you still a moral being? The second river that we confront today is cyber warfare. In 2010, a worm called Stuxnet slipped into the computers of an Iranian nuclear facility. It made the centrifuges spin themselves to death. No bullet was fired. No border was crossed. No soldier marched. There were no boots on the ground, and yet a war was waged. Welcome to the new battlefield, where the soldier is invisible, the weapon is a few lines of code, and the casualty is a hospital somewhere that cannot run its dialysis machine tonight. The 1965 war that Shastriji fought had rules, a Geneva Convention, a front line, an enemy you could see across the sand. Today, when a power grid flickers in Mumbai, we cannot say with certainty whether it was a fault, a hacker, or a hostile state. The rifle has gone digital. The plow has gone digital. Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan now demands a third line. Glory to the scientist. But also, responsibility upon the scientist. Because the soldier who fires a bullet knows he has fired it. The coder who fires a worm may never know what he hit or whom. The third river that we confront today is the dignity of the human body. There is an industry in our age that has done what no invading army ever managed to do. It has entered every home, every phone, every adolescent's bedroom, without exception, and it has done so legally. I speak of pornography, and of its newest, most monstrous child, the deep fake. The use of artificial intelligence to take the face of a real woman, often a schoolgirl, often without her knowledge, and place it onto a body in scenes to which she has never consented. In September 2023, a small Spanish town called Almendralejo woke up to discover that more than 20 schoolgirls, some as young as 11, had been deep-faked into pornographic images by their own classmates. The pictures had spread across the town's phones before the girls had finished their breakfast. The law had no name yet for what had been done to them. This is morality without law in its cruelest form. The legal system arrived years too late. with a vocabulary far too small. The fourth river is climate. But before I deal with climate, let me just say this. India has made data cheap. We are among the countries in the world where data is the cheapest. We have allowed data to proliferate. In nuclear technology, there is a dual-use doctrine. Technology which can be used for peaceful purposes and technology which can be used for assault on humanity. Data today has the same problems. Data which has given blessings to humanity which were unfathomable 20 years ago. Reaching out to patients who would have no access to medicine, for instance. Safeguarding the environment. Safeguarding agriculture. But it's the same data which can produce hordes of deepfakes. Target our children. Target young women and the not so young women. So what is India going to do? Is India not going to come out with a law which will ban pornography, which will ban the depiction of women on the internet in its cruelest forms? I think the time has come for India to enact legislation which will meet this third river, the river which constitutes an assault on the human body and human integrity. The fourth river which we confront is the climate change. This is perhaps the cruelest of the four because most of its victims have not yet been born. In January 2023, the people of Joshimath in our own Uttarakhand woke to find cracks splitting their homes in two. The mountain was sinking under them, roads buckled, temples tilted, a town built over centuries vanished in a matter of months. In July of 2024, in Wayanad, Kerala, a single night of rain killed over 200 people. Entire families were gone before dawn. In India, I feel these changes less as distant data and more as lived experience. There have been seasons when the monsoon arrives unevenly, delayed in one region and intense in another, leaving farmers to navigate uncertainty where predictability once guided every decision. At the same time, the summer offers its own form of instruction. One steps out in the afternoon and returns with a new appreciation for shade, for water, and for every ceiling fan that continues to function. In its own way, climate is no longer a matter of discussion alone. It is something we encounter directly in the course of everyday life. In cities, rainfall that earlier passed now gathers with greater force, turning familiar roads into flooded stretches within hours. Yesterday, I read that according to real-time global temperature rankings on a single day, 95 of the world's 100 hottest cities were in India, with temperatures in several places rising well above 45 degrees Celsius. Numbers like these carry a reality that no abstraction can soften. They enter daily life into how people work, travel, wait, and endure. What stands out is that these are no longer isolated episodes, remembered for their rarity. They form a sequence that people begin to anticipate, even as hope holds on to a different outcome. It points to more than isolated disruption. It reflects a world where stability itself feels less assured. Movements that once appeared routine, of goods, of seasons, of expectations, now carry an undercurrent of uncertainty. What stays with me is the manner in which this is unfolding. It does not arrive with spectacle. It takes shape through decisions made elsewhere, through weather that arrives differently, through small adjustments that gather, slowly and steadily, into something far more consequential. The spring meeting of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund concluded on 18th April 2026 in Washington, D.C. They unfolded under the shadow of tensions in West Asia, at a time when global pressures had already begun to weigh in on supply chains, unsettled energy markets, and reshape economic expectations. Within that setting, leaders engaged with a range of pressing concerns: sovereign debt, the emerging oil crisis, and the implications of a slowing global economy. As I reflect on those discussions, what stands out is the difficulty of sustaining alignment even on shared long-term challenges. Resistance from major economies, particularly the US, to advancing the global climate agenda reveals how complex collective decision-making has become in this moment. Yet make no mistake about it, we are interconnected as we never before were. Data has interconnected us. Climate change has shown us that we belong to one integral humanity. And the impact of war, as recently as in the Gulf, tells us that what happens in the Strait of Hormuz can have a possible impact not only on energy markets in India and Indonesia, but on elections in November in the US. That's the impact of this global interconnection which we all share. It signals a world adjusting its expectations downward, learning to proceed with greater caution in an uncertain terrain. So where does that lead us to ethics in the age of AI? What we earlier recognized as a matter of moral discipline in individual life now enters the domain of systems, institutions, and decision-making. And in doing so, it comes to be expressed as the ethics of public life. Decisions which once rested visibly with individuals now move through systems that learn, classify, and recommend, often before a human mind has had the opportunity to intervene. The question then is no longer only what is decided, but how that decision comes into being and whether that process remains open to understanding and accountability. At Amazon, engineers developed a system intended to review resumes at scale, drawing upon past hiring data to identify patterns and recommend candidates. For a time, it appeared efficient, even precise, but as the system was examined more closely, it became evident that it had begun to favor certain profiles while downgrading others, reflecting patterns embedded within historical data. The system had not been instructed to discriminate. It had learned to do so. By 2018, the project was set aside, not because it failed to function, but because it functioned too faithfully to the data which it had inherited. In parts of India, as we know, predictive policing tools analyze past records, incidents, locations, and patterns of reporting to identify areas where attention may be required. At first glance, the method appears grounded in data, guided by repetition rather than instinct. But the data itself carries the imprint of earlier decisions, where policing was concentrated, which communities were more frequently recorded, and how patterns were shaped over time. As these systems learn, they return to those same patterns, reinforcing attention in ways that may not always reflect present reality. It is here that the ethics of public life acquire renewed significance. Integrity no longer resides only in the decision maker. It must extend into the processes through which decisions are shaped, into structural design, into oversight, into the willingness to question outcomes that appear seamless on the surface. Attention must deepen, scrutiny must remain active, responsibility must travel with precision, even if it is mediated through layers that are not visible. And finally, that brings me to the conclusion. Into three invitations. Three in a section called Life as an Art. The first invitation is from Shastri ji's own name. When Lal Bahadur dropped his last sermon and took the title Shastri, meaning to know the Shastras, he was making a quiet but understatement. He was saying, I am not my birth. I am my choice. So my first invitation is this. Stop asking, who are my people? Start asking, what are my values? A complete society cannot be built on the arithmetic of identities. It can only be built on the geometry of shared principles. The second invitation is to decouple our morality from its rewards. We have built a civilization of transactional ethics. What are the tariffs? The tariffs are all about transactional ethics. You stop buying Russian oil and I'll reduce your tariffs. You do this and I'll impose 100% tariffs. What are tariffs? Tariffs are part of the new transactional ethics game. So we have built a civilization of transactional ethics. If each of us as citizens says that I will be honest if honesty pays, I will follow the law if I am being watched, I will be just if justice benefits me, then that's not morality. That is commerce. Shastri resigned from power without being asked, without reward, without political gain. His life casts on us the duty to act rightly, even when it costs you everything. The duty to act rightly, even when it costs you everything. The third invitation is simply to complete the incomplete canvas. Every great artist knows a secret. A masterpiece is never finished. Michelangelo is said to have died apologizing that he had not done enough. When I was young, pardon the personal intervention or interjection, my mother used to she used to learn Hindustani classical music from Kishorita Yamunkar, as we used to call her, Gana Saraswati Kishori Yamunkar. And every Saturday and Sunday when I went with my mother to her guru, she would sing the same Meera Bhajan. And I would wonder, why is she singing the same song that she was singing last weekend? Why is she not singing something new? Even as a child of 6 or 7, I knew it was the same song which was being repeated, the same tumri which was being sung. And I would ask myself, why the same song? Today I have an answer for you. And the answer is this, that every great artist knows a secret, which is that a masterpiece is never finished. A complete society is not a destination we arrive at. It is a direction we commit ourselves to. Every generation inherits an incomplete canvas. A society with injustices still unpainted over, with laws which are still unjust, with morality still unevenly distributed. Every generation must ask, what strokes will we add? My third and final invitation is simply this: pick up the brush. We are here this evening, which means that we are educated, curious, and not indifferent. That is not a privilege to hoard, but a responsibility to discharge. So let me return at the end, come back to where we began, to a boy standing at the banks of the Ganga, no money, no ferry, no guarantee he would reach the other side. He could have turned back. There was no law saying he could not. There was no shame in poverty. But something in him, call it dharma, call it character, call it the inextinguishable human refusal to accept smallness, water. He swam. On the other side of that river was a school. In that school there was learning. Through that learning came a leader. Through that leader came a nation that, for one extraordinary moment in 1965, chose sacrifice over selfishness, solidarity over survival, and showed the world what a nearly complete society looks like. We have not finished that swim. The Ganga is still before us. The current is still strong. But the school is still on the other side. The school of the complete society, of law tempered by morality, of morality structured by law, of people who live not just legally, but people who live with a sense of shared living in a shared destiny. The only question that matters, the question that Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, with his quiet eyes and enormous courage, asks each of us from wherever he rests, is not, can you swim? The question which Shastri ji asks us is, will you swim? Namaskar, धन्यवाद.
We are deeply grateful, sir, for an address that was as illuminating as it was timely. Your insights will remain with the audience far longer than today. May I now request Professor Praveen Gupta, Director, Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management, to present a memento to Justice Chandrachud as a token of our appreciation. Thank you, sir. Now I invite Shri Sunil Shastri, Trustee Lal Bahadur Shastri National Memorial Trust, to deliver the words of thanks.
The speaker of today, Dr. Justice Dhananjaya Chandrachud ji, my brother, respected Anil Bhaiya, ladies and gentlemen, and friends. I'm indeed very happy to be here today to propose a vote of thanks to someone whom I used to admire from many years, because when I was minister in UP, I used to go quite often to Allahabad, the Chief Justice of India. Hamare Dhananjaya ji used to be there, and always, normally not that, I have even met him many times in the aircraft, traveling from Allahabad to Delhi. So, I have a very personal relationship with him. In one way, मानवता को कैसे आप जोड़ते हैं, मानवता को एक तरफ से करते हैं, तो इन्होंने आज उस बात को अपने भाषण में भी कहा, वो जो इन्होंने अपने विचारों को रखा है on ethics of public life in an age of technology, बहुत सुंदर तरीके से रखा है. एंड ये एक ऐसा भाषण मुझे लगा कि शायद ये आज के हर राजनीतिज्ञ को, पॉलिटिकल पर्सन को सुनना चाहिए, समझना चाहिए. क्योंकि आज टुडे आई विल लाइक टू बी वेरी क्लियर that there is no इंसानियत in the country, in the world. हर जगह everybody is after the life of others. They don't want to live peacefully. They don't want to live with all that love and affection. No, they are all bent upon कि कैसे हम एक दूसरे को ख़त्म करें. They want to finish. I don't want to name today that लड़ाई हो रही है ईरान और अमेरिका एंड ऑल, बट ये सब एक उसी दिशा में है, काम हो रहा है everywhere. And I think when he was talking, when he was giving his lecture here, very nicely he mentioned बाबूजी का, शास्त्री जी का सब मेंशन करने के बाद इन्होंने एक चीज़ कहा कि हम लोगों के बीच एक इंसानियत होनी चाहिए. इन्होंने कहा कि ह्यूमन मैनकाइंड, दैट शुड बी देयर, दैट फीलिंग शुड बी देयर. वो नहीं है आज, कहाँ है? आई एम वेरी frank with you all, speaking with my heart, open heart, that task kahan hai? Aap, if you think that it is there and is very much there, there is no need for that insaniyat, so theek hai, then you can say whatever you like. But I personally feel the politicians of today have completely, they are nowhere near Lal Bahadur Shastri. They have to learn. आज अगर ऐसे आज के लेक्चर के बाद, अगर सुनने के बाद, अगर आज पॉलिटिशियन यहाँ होते और सुनते तो उनको बहुत लगता कि आज करना है उनको बहुत कुछ. धनंजय जी, your name is such, that you are victor, you are a winner. So आज you have proved yourself that you are winner from day one, and you are going to be winner all the life. No problem. So I feel that today we have the honor of having Dr. Sobhna Radhakrishnan, our 21, the year 21, she spoke on Babuji on a topic. So आज क्या है? It's a lucky day. मतलब normally I don't see the another speaker जिसने lecture दिया है, memorial lecture, वो आता है, हर जगह नहीं आता है. But you came today, I'm so happy. I would not like to take much of time because बहुत समय होगा हमारा, लेकिन समय बहुत उपयोगी था. समय बहुत उपयोगी था. आप इसको इस तरह से इसका आंकलन करिए. Please try to analyze how much labor, how much efforts हमारे चंद्रचूड़ जी ने यहाँ रखा और किस तरह से इन्होंने एथिक्स ऑफ पब्लिक लाइफ, कैसे उन्होंने उसको शानदार तरीके से यहाँ पे हम लोगों के सामने प्रस्तुत किया. तो आई वुड नॉट लाइक टू से मच. I would like to once again request all of you to please give a standing ovation to Chandrachud ji, because it was something wonderful. Thank you very much. Chandrachud ji, I would again like to thank you very much and congratulate you for a wonderful lecture of yours, and it is really touching, heart-touching. With these words, I thank all of you for coming and having attending this function, and we all hope that we will soon again meet. Thank you very much. Thank you.
As we conclude today's memorial lecture, I extend my sincere gratitude to all the esteemed guests, dignitaries, and attendees for their presence and participation. Your support and engagement continue to uphold the spirit and legacy of late Sri Lal Bahadur Shastri. Now, I warmly invite all the guests to join us for refreshments. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.